Hello, true duelists. YGO here in the trash compactor. Oh no, hope the walls don't close in on me like the meta did on this deck. Welcome to You Should Play. I'm renaming it again, I'm not scared. A series where I talk about why I play and why you should play various decks. This week I'm talking about Kozmo. Star Wars meets Wizard of Oz, in one of the coolest concepts for an archetype in the entirety of the game. Like, actually, it's crazy how good these two themes matched up. So, if you like Star Wars, this lady here, and OTK's, boy, do I have a deck for you. The deck is divided into two main categories, the ships and the pilots. Only one of the pilots is ever shown to be in one of the ships, so pilot is more of just a good counterpart to ships than an actual term, but they're pilots. The pilots are all psychic type monsters and have a quick effect to banish themselves from the field to special summon a Kozmo from your hand with a level 1 or higher than itself, whereas the ships are all machines that have the effect to banish themselves from the grave when destroyed to summon a Kozmo from the deck with a lower level than itself. Pretty solid effects, and make for some funny imagery when imagining a literal tin can becoming a Star Destroyer from Star Wars. Unacceptable! This deck has a bit of a special place in my heart, as the cards were first coming out during the peak of when my friends and I were playing in 2015, and right when I started this channel. That's still one of my most popular videos as of me making this video right now. And once upon a time, I wanted to try and make this channel the Kozmo channel, to one-trick it into being the place to go for Kozmo strategies and whatnot. The cost of Dark Destroyer in 2015 quickly abolished that idea, and with the playset costing as much as my monthly rent, a fact I even used for this joke video trailer during my next great YugiTuber run.
Hey Mom. Yeah, no, I'm good. I don't think I'm gonna be able to make rent payment this month. No, I bought a playset of Dark Destroyers.
Yeah, it clearly didn't work out that great for me. Regardless, let's talk about the cards. Starting with the level 1 Tin Can. R2-D2 meets the Tin Man, only this thing has fists to hit you with. Goes well with its 0 attack and defense. It is the pilot with the unique ability to take out into literally any of the other Kozmo monsters, bar one card I'll talk about later, and when it released in Kozmo's final wave of support, it changed the strategy of the deck. During the end phase, you can pay 500 life points to reveal 3 differently named Kozmo cards from your deck. One is randomly added to your hand while the others go to the grave. Giving you a soft search made it quite easy to thin the deck when coupled with the fact that it also filled up your graveyard. The fact that that isn't once per turn also meant summoning one for your normal summon and another off, say, emergency teleport, could quickly make it so your deck was nothing left but the power traps and generic spells you played, since resolving a few of these can easily chew through the entirety of the archetype that is in your deck. Straw Man is C3PO, and you won't believe it, the Scarecrow. Also may be my go-to example for the hypothetical Fluwanderese player I want to make fun of. What a terrible joke. Instead, look at the name of it in Spanish. 12 out of 10. It lets you pay 500 life points to special summon any Kozmo monster from your banished pile with its effects negated, and it destroys that monster in the end phase. Great for getting back at Dark Destroyer and then an extra float from it. It's always been a solid one of, at least in my books. The other level 2 I completely forgot about until writing this script, and that is Scaredy Lion. Chewbacca meets the Cowardly Lion meets Immense Disappointment. It can pay 500 life points to return 3 banished Kozmos from the grave, and then burn the opponent for 500. Kozmo burn for game? Did somebody say time in the round? I think so. No, they said get that shit off the screen, it's garbage. Stormtroopers is the level 3, because I'm done talking about the lion. The Stormtroopers and the Flying Monkeys. You heard that right, they fly now.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
Awful movie. It can pay 1,000 life points to summon a Psychic type Kozmo from your grave, a solid bit of recovery, and could help you to unclog your hand of some of the ships. I also remember this being used a lot in the Fire King version of the deck post Bosch, when people tried to make this deck a more combo-oriented one than control. Still, it's a lot better than the Lion, so we can take that and run. Farm Girl was the first one that I pulled from the like 5 boxes of Clash of Rebellions that I bought, and that made me consider playing the deck, seeing as it was a pricey card on release. Luke Skywalker are reimagined as Dorothy, or more accurately as a woman holding a gun. Is that just Luke Skywalker perfected? Depends on if she'd kill her teen nephew for having some angsty thoughts, I suppose, but the ability to pay 500 life points after inflicting battle damage to search any card in the archetype is solid. These days it's a lot less reliable, but back in the day, and even once in a while in the modern game, if this thing gets through, it can be game. Punch with Farm Girl, search Dark Destroyer, attack with another ship, tag into Dark Destroyer, and use Dark Destroyer to pop your own ship, and then you get 2 more monsters that can attack. It adds up quick. It's got a place in my heart for getting me into the deck, and as always a 1-up for me. I only have one question though.
What's the dog doing?
No, actually, it's in the art of this and Scaredy Lion, but we don't have it, so we'll get support of it one day, Copium. Moving on, Obi-Woman Nobi. Good Witch is the Good Witch of the North, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Qui-Gon. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Wikia says this is Yoda, which I guess I kinda see, but Yoda reimagined by a horny weeb, I suppose. It can pay 500 life points to Book-a-Moon one of your opponent's monsters. It's not a quick effect, and it's also really not worth playing. Sheeple will tell you Wicked Witch is based on the Wicked Witch of the East, but the enlightened among us know that she's based on Jeff the Killer. You can pay 1,000 life points to make it indestructible by battle or card effects for the rest of the turn. Could be a good stall to save you some life points. It was okay back in the day, and really these days it's only played if you really like Darth Maul's lightsaber. Which is fair, because that shit was hype the first time I saw it. Dark Lady is not a racist term and is in fact the last pilot. Being level 5 makes it so that it's best floated into off of a ship more often than not, but the ability to pay 1,000 life points for a quick effect monster negate is strong. Definitely a worthwhile inclusion, and seeing as it's a combination of the Wicked Witch of the West and Darth Vader, it's pretty fitting that the big bad would actually be a threat. For the ships, we'll start where all of us did in 2015. Slip Rider is an X-Wing? I know it's not an X, but it's a fucking shoe in space. It's a miracle that it looks as good as it does. If normal or special summoned, it pops a Speller Trap on the field, which has been solid since day 1. It also doesn't have to be an opponent's Speller Trap, and is optional, which can all help to make this card just a little bit better than it needed to be. Pop a Kozmo Town to search, or Call the Haunted, or Oasis Dragon Souls to get the float off another ship. There are some cheeky things you can do with this. It also makes great material for Cyber Dragon Nova into Infinity, or even something like Constellar Pleiades, or maybe I still desperately wish that it was 2016. Who knows? The other level 5 ship is Delta Shuttle, an Imperial shuttle. Definitely Googled that. That is not organic in my script. Did those do battle in Star Wars? I just said I have no clue. This clearly has no relation to the Wizard of Oz, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I don't know what Wild Crow the wiki is talking about. Maybe the Yada that was recently unlimited. I'm sure the book that got adapted into a film a century ago was referencing Yada Garasu. That's a guaranteed right there. It's a ship. It foolishes a Kozmo from the deck and targets a monster to lose attack and defense equal to the level of the sent monster times 100. That is a cent for cost, which is solid, but beyond cheeky plays in the Fire King version, I don't know if anyone's ever really played it. Dogfighter is Link support from 2015, summoning a token with equal stats to itself during each standby. I'm kidding, of course, it wasn't good in 2015 and time has not been kind to it, as waiting for the opponent's turn to do anything on your next is almost always a subpar card. If someone can tell me what wolf this is from The Wizard of Oz, I will give you a singular bonus point, but I don't remember a wolf in that movie whatsoever. And before you even try to tell me about a book, this is a video about Yu-Gi-Oh, my friend. Not a single person here has read a thing in their life. It's a TIE fighter and nothing else. Landwalker is from Attack of the Clones and therefore funny. And by funny, I mean bad. If another Kozmo card would be destroyed, you can destroy one other Kozmo card you control instead. This was never good, as destroying ships just led to more ships or pilots in the deck's prime, and because of that, people made plays to not destroy your cards whenever was possible. In niche situations, it can maybe pop itself to float in place of the opponent destroying the field spell, but even the field spell floats in this deck, so it's really not that good in either situation. Again, the spider in The Wizard of Oz is a reference too deep in the lore for me to even try and comprehend. It's simply the spider droid thing. Forerunner is what made this deck worth playing after Clash of Rebellions was released and set the standard for what the deck would be known for. Starting with this ship and every one that is a higher level, they are all untargetable by the opponent's card effects. These days, that's more of a nuisance, but back in the day, that was quite a bit of a problem. Castel was the go-to way to remove problem cards at that time, and it wasn't an option for these cards, meaning players would be forced into spots to destroy them, which would just allow the Kozmo player to float into more problems. The fact that it's the weakest of the untargetables with 2800 attack just adds up to the fun. It also does have a life point gaining effect during your standby phase, which rarely comes up or is all that important. And it's also mandatory, making the True Draco matchup the worst possible experience, which is rare because True Draco's just so fun in every other circumstance. Still, making the Millennium Falcon a Yu-Gi-Oh card was cool to see. And as for Wizard of Oz, apparently there were silver slippers in the book. It's this, for the 9th time, it's just a spaceship. Next up is the reason to play the deck, or the reason you hated it back in the day. For me, it was also the reason I couldn't play it, but that's just me making the joke about me not having money for the 3000th time. Speaking of 3000, that is the attack stat of this untargetable beast that could destroy a monster if summoned, normal or specialed. That made it a threat, and it can still put in work to this day. The pop can clear opponent's monsters to help you push for game, or your own ships that have already attacked to have them float down into a smaller ship to attack for even more damage. This card is what enables the overwhelming majority of the OTKs this deck can put out, and being able to float into all but 3 of the monsters in the archetype means popping itself even on your turn 1 can get you to any of the monsters that you have in the deck. It's also based on a Sith infiltrator? Sure. I don't know what movie that was in, but goddamn if it doesn't look cool. Dark Eclipser is the next big ship, another 3000 attack untargetable beater. This one is a little different from the other ships. You can still tag a pilot into it, but when it's destroyed, it doesn't summon a lower level Kozmo. It'll add one of a lower level than itself, that being 9, so 8 or lower from your deck to your hand instead, making it less threatening. If this thing could float into Dark Destroyer, it probably would have seen more play, but as a one-of, it was good enough for being a pain to get rid of. It also has the ability to negate trap cards by banishing a Kozmo from your grave, which isn't terrible. Doesn't come up a lot, but I mean, could have a worse effect. Could be the spider thing. The last monster is, of course, the Death Star. Just like Star Wars movies keep making Death Stars, so too can you in all of your duels. Dark Planet is the most unique ship in the deck. You cannot tag into it from a pilot, meaning Konami did deny us the notion of R2-D2 becoming a Death Star in the middle of battle because they are cowards. It has to be summoned by banishing Kozmo monsters from your hand whose total levels equal 10 or more, and can't be summoned by other ways. So no Call the Haunteding this thing out either. But what you do get for this high demand summon, a 4000 attack untargetable ship that does not even properly float. It has the same add to hand effect as Eclipser and is the spell negation equivalent, negating a spell card by banishing a Kozmo from your grave. This is an all or nothing sort of card, by which I mean you will either play 3 or 0, because the only worthwhile way to summon out a Dark Planet is by banishing another copy of Dark Planet, or else you're just taking a massive neg in terms of advantages. For spell and traps, they have 4 cards. Fittingly enough, 2 spells and 2 traps, and also fittingly enough, there's a good and a bad one in each category. Kozmo Town is their field spell, a dope mashup of Coruscant and the Emerald City. It's also, in my mind, the start of overpowered field spells in this game. It has 3 effects, each of them being solid. Once per turn, you can recover a Kozmo monster to your hand from the banished pile, and then take damage equal to its level times 100. You can also magical mallet away some of your Kozmo monsters, offering a chance to mulligan if you've got too many of the ships or not enough pilots, or vice versa. And the last effect is that it can search any Kozmo card from your deck if it's destroyed in the field zone, which does mean that it can search a copy of itself when destroyed, which is very handy. Kozmo Lightsword depicts a cooler lightsaber fight than in any of the sequels ever gave us, but is about as useful in terms of the card game as this scene from Boba Fett is watchable.
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick.
Just real quick, gonna turn around away from the people charging at me with guns. I respect it. I also hate it. This equip spell for an archetype of cards that leave the field can only equip to a Kozmo monster, giving it 500 attack and defense, allowing it to attack twice per battle phase, and inflicting piercing damage. And if it goes to the grave, you can pay 800 life points to add it to your hand. The only Kozmo card that doesn't pay in multiples of 500, it is beyond useless. The strongest card to equip to this would get to 2700 attack, which is nice and all, but this deck doesn't need help OTKing with things like Dark Destroyer and every monster being able to tag into more monsters. It's nice art, it's a bad card. Cosmojo is both a subtle reference to Austin Powers and a good piece of disruption, destroying a Kozmo card you control to non-targeted banish a card from either the opponent's field or grave. It's damn solid. And if you pop a ship, the ship can float to potentially lead to more disruption by summoning Slip Rider or Dark Lady. Not much else to say here, it's just a good card. Cosmorning is a continuous disappointment. Cosmorning is a continuous trap, making monsters destroyed by Kozmo monsters in battle be shuffled to the deck rather than going to the grave. That is admittedly a pretty solid effect and the bane of a Burning Abyss player, or at least it would be if this card saw play at any point in time. It can also be banished from the grave to make the first damage you would take from a battle involving a Kozmo monster instead gain that much life points instead of taking it. The deck really could have used more ways to gain life points, but it needed to be much better than this. Simply put, it does not do enough to actually help the deck make its plays, and the life point gain isn't nearly enough. That being said, booba. I know that'll sell some of you, that's an unfortunate truth. If you play this card for that reason though, morally speaking, you are banned from locals. And that's the deck's core, all 20 cards. And there is Emergency Teleport, an honorary Kozmo card that once upon a time came back to 3 to help push this deck, and then helped to limit the card and is again back at 3 as of making this video to be abused by this deck again, and a lot more decks that are better than this one. At least, you know, as of the making of this video. The deck was one of the best back in 2016. After the killing of the Duelist Alliance format on the November 2015 ban lists, it stepped in to fill the power gap alongside Monarchs, PK Fire, and the early predecessors of Pepe. In my opinion, this deck was the floor of the metagame at that time, being the barrier to entry for rogue decks. Monarch's Stormforth and Aether plays, PK's just relentless grind game and Beatrice disruption, and then, you know, Ignister from Pendulum decks were all powerhouses fully able to contend with Dark Destroyer. But older decks at the time that lacked means to clear Dark Destroyer meant they couldn't stand a chance against the format's meta. Not that Kozmo was a bad deck, to be clear, but I believe its linearity made its plays predictable, and predictable means preventable when you're playing high-level Yu-Gi-Oh! But for you, that could be a benefit, because it's not 2016, you're picking this deck up in the post-2020s. And beyond the inevitable apocalypse approaching us, according to every news media, you can just have fun with it. If you're looking for a simple and reliable OTK deck, Kozmo is a damn good choice. In paper, this deck is cheap as hell. Eclipser is the most expensive card at the deck at about $15, and Dark Planet is about $5.50. But Eclipser is a one-of, and Planet's fully optional. After that, everything in this deck is under $5 going by TCG Player. It's a little more pricey than, say, the Fur Hire deck I recommended last week, but it's also better than the Fur Hire deck I recommended last week, so that's why it costs more. The more you know. My friend was playing a true Draco Kozmo deck a few years back, around about 2018-2019, utilizing the ship's floating effects with Dragonic's diagrammed pop to search, and while it was fine, I feel that the decks are best played separate, as that one card is really the only real synergy between the two of them. The deck is, in my humble opinion, best played as it was more or less in 2016. Dark Destroyer control with some OTK buttons. Is that because it's generally the best and most consistent build of the deck, or do I just have nostalgia goggles on? Shut up. Some solemn cards, Cosmojo, revival cards, thinking Call the Haunted or Oasis for Slip Rider synergies, or even just back to the front to make your cards less vulnerable to your opponent's disruptions. Emergency Teleport and Allure of Darkness, as well as Prayer, can squeeze out a few games in a local setting. And damn if the cards don't look cool as shit when you're doing so. Really, I'm just going to speak to the version I know best. The Fire King version was always interesting to me, but it always felt like the deck was trying to force itself to be combo as opposed to playing to what it naturally could. Sure, you can get out an Infinity and a Dark Lady with a Leviair and like a set strike, but adding Garnets like Little Garunix to the deck that already has Monarch level bricking problems doesn't really seem like it's going to be worth your time. Part of what made me like the deck back in the day wasn't just the obvious beatdown strategy it enabled, but some of the cheeky plays you could make to soft combo in an otherwise linear deck. As I've mentioned before, Dark Destroyer to pop your own cards for either OTKs or setups by getting to the cards in your deck offers not just a variety in your plays, but a slight boost in consistency. The deck also has access to negates pretty easily with Dark Lady and kind of Eclipser, and with Dark Planet as well if you want to play that card. Another fun play I've mentioned is using Call the Haunted to revive one of your ships sent off of Tin Can, and then popping Call the Haunted with Slip Rider. That will destroy the ship and allow you to float into more monsters for more shenanigans. The deck's lack of an extra deck also made Winter Cherries an easy fit into the deck, as beyond Infinity and Pleiades, I never really went into the extra deck, and even then that was rare. In the modern day, this means you can tech in things like Pot of Extravagance for more draw power, as it almost never makes an impact on your duels unless maybe you're playing Dogmatic Punishment. Even then, you can just throw in 3 of everything you want and call it a day. A modern look at the deck proves to me that all that changes stays the same. YGO Top Deck has the last top being from 2020, but we also haven't had events since 2020, so that is something to consider. The tops are only from a regional, to be clear. This is not a YCS level deck, but most builds really just run one-ofs for the Kozmo monsters, with only Dark Destroyer, Tin Can, Slip Rider, and Dark Lady being the ones in multiples. It's not uncommon to see main decked Super Polys, some Solemn cards, and these days people have replaced Call the Haunted with Back to the Front, though as mentioned with the Slip Rider plays, you could make an argument as to which is better, or at the very least which one you'll prefer. But it's still at the core the same deck that it ever was. The artifact monsters are also playable in this as well, I should mention, and can make for some more disruption with the Scythe lock, since Konami just refuses to ban it. But even when they inevitably ban Scythe, as I assume they will, Morale Tech is still an extra piece of disruption, and with all the main decked revival cards, it ain't horrible. The deck is not without its issue. As I've said earlier, it has the Monarch level of problem of bricking, opening way too many high-level monsters that don't get onto the field by themselves, meaning you lose. Sure, Kozmo Town kinda helps with this, but very little can be done to help fix a hand with 4 level 5 or higher monsters. It's also very reliant on its normal summon. E-Telly at 3 will help with this in the current format I'm making this video, but modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Also has Ash Blossom to stop it, and E-Telly is far from the worst Ash target that the opponent can hit, just in a generic duel. It also is as predictable as it ever was. Anyone even halfway familiar with the deck knows that the only real threat is Dark Destroyer, and it was annoying in 2016, but these days we've learned to deal with cards like Dragoon, which is twice the problem that Dark Destroyer ever was. This is the build I've made to play against friends casually. I didn't have spare extravs at the time, so maybe you want to throw in those. And with the Albaz reprints, they should be a lot more affordable. I'm playing 3 Farm Girl because I'm ignorant and because I am aware of how much I paid for Clash of Rebellion in 2015, but really you should not be playing more than 2 of it. And if you're competitive minded, that's really a one-of. Good Witch also should not be played. Again, that's a real retro play circa August 2015. This deck is purely for fun for me. There's not a lot going on here with this build, but that's honestly kind of just Kozmo. It's a simple deck with a really cool aesthetic, good for some fun explosive plays, and a less competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a blast to OTK with, a deck I can fall back on when I'm looking for a night of dueling where I don't want to have to think at all, but I don't want to just sit and flip Skill Drain or some equivalent. And that's really all I get. It's an Unga Bunga deck. Feel free to play it if you're in a Unga Bunga mood. So, that's that. Thank you for watching. Leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed, and take some solace in the fact that even if this deck fell out of favor from the meta, Konami had a cooler take on Star Wars than Disney did. And as always, subscribe to YGO Strats so you too can become a true duelist.
I'm Gotham's reckoning.